Hello everybody, I am Aaron aka Brick Matrix, and I am back as I promised from my introduction video, and I am here with the Jorstad Designs LUCREHULK class battleship. Now when I say Jorstad Designs, that is the name of the designer of this model. I bought this model from him off of eBay. I believe I paid around $20 at the time. I don't know if it's went up or down in value. But what I do know is I was one of the very first people to build this model. The design came out back in October of 2017. I bought it the moment I saw it. This was, I've seen many designs, I've seen many people try to, do this design, and the LUCREHULK is a difficult design to do. And none of them looked right to me. But when I saw this thing, I fell in love with it immediately. It is an aesthetic masterpiece. It is perfectly proportioned and perfectly scaled. I believe that there's only two ways to build this model. Either you build it really big or you build it like this. The only other model to compare to this one that actually looked good was a 30,000 piece model. I don't know the name of the designer, but that thing is awesome, but it was just way too big for me and way too expensive, so I don't have the space for something like that, or the time. So, I bought it, ordered the parts immediately, was one of the first people to build it, and it was an amazing experience. I loved every part of it. It was a more difficult build. I mean, when you buy the design, I say design because there is no instructions. There's no step-by-step instructions like you're building a Lego model. You get the final LDD design, and it comes in sections, and you basically have to tear every piece off manually in LDD to see how that it's put together, and then put it back together with bricks. So working a little bit each day. I believe it took me about 2 weeks to build. You could probably get it done in a 48-hour period if you just don't sleep and build throughout the entire 48 hours. But it took me about 2 weeks to get the parts in. I had to order through about 5 different Bricklink sellers. There's nothing super rare on this model, but the more expensive part, I would have to say, is the greebling, the small little elements that you just have to have so many of. There is about 3,500 pieces here, and yeah, I mean, it is just beautiful. I'd have to say the hardest part of the build wasn't so much combining the sections, but getting it to sit on the stand. Now, I did have to make little improvements to the stand to get it to be more stable, because every time I basically bumped it or wobbled the table, the thing would just fall over. So I know it is something that Jorstad is working on updating. I've been in communication with him, and I've explained the problems. I believe there's another person, another friend of mine, who's built the model and had the same issues, so I believe he is currently working on updating the stand. I did make my own little improvements to make it a little bit more stable, but I am still very afraid to move this thing because it is so fragile. I've heard it compared to, well, from the other guy who built the model. I actually compared the difficulty of getting it to sit on the stand. He basically compared it to building Cave God's AT-AT and trying to put the legs together and getting it to stand on the legs. And if anybody who has seen Cave God's AT-AT and built it, they know what I'm talking about. So let's get into the details of this design, and I'll give you some close-up shots, and we will go from there. And as you can see, this is how the LUCREHULK comes. Now, this is the design. This is what first pops up when you load the file that you get from Jorstad. And basically, as you can see, it comes in sections, and you basically have to tear apart each one of these sections, you know, by removing the pieces one by one and hit and undo to put them back together and seeing how they're built. Now, I have a certain way of going about this. I feel like my route is the most easiest route for me personally. There may be other routes. Everybody has their own preferences on how they do this, but there is no instructions, as you can see, and I'm not going to get too far into tearing this model apart here on video because it is intellectual property. So if you'd like to see some more of the interior of the build, you'll actually have to go ahead and buy the model yourselves. Alright, now that you've seen the close-ups, you definitely see what I'm talking about, how beautiful this model really is. And I actually did have time to sit down with the designer. I am friends with him on Facebook, and I went through a little Q&A section with him, and I felt that it would be something interesting that you guys would like to know about his thoughts and insights into this design. So I'm going to read off my questions to him and his answers, starting with what made you take on and tackle the LUCREHULK design? His response was, I've had several people request the design, and I've always admired the shape of the ship, so I finally sat down one day and decided to just make it up. How long did it take to design the LUCREHULK? And he said, I design all my models in LDD to start because that gives me a pretty good idea of the parts I'm going to need when I actually build it. Obviously, there's always some fine-tuning that goes into the process once I've got actual bricks, but using the LDD really streamlines the process for me since I usually don't have all the required parts on hand. Of all my models, the LUCREHULK was actually the quickest to design, which is pretty surprising because it is a pretty complicated design, so that surprised me. He said it really only roughly took him 3 days. Pretty cool. Pretty good too. And I was like, was it a simple or complicated design to do? And he said this model was complicated simply due to the structural requirements of elevating the model and getting it to sit in the air. Since it is circular, there's only so many ways to connect the base to the ship without it detracting from the aesthetic appeal of the model. And I think that kind of proves my point, you know, how the stand being so, you know, so wobbly and unstable that I'm afraid to move it, but once it's sitting on it, it just looks beautiful and you just can't complain. What parts presented the most difficulty? He said definitely the final assembly of the sections. It took a couple goes to figure out the best way to get all the sections together on the base without the whole thing flipping over. Again, you know, like I said. How did you determine the scale? He said, what design a ship? How did you determine the scale? He said, when designing a ship, I usually pick a defining feature and determine the best way to recreate it with bricks, and unless the scale is totally ridiculous, I design the rest of the model around that. For the LUCREHULK, the scale was the product of both the core ship and the signal receiver dishes located around the ship. And when he refers to the core ship, what a lot of people don't know is when you see in episode 2 during the first battle of Geonosis, I believe it was called, and the Republic gunships invade the Geonosis arena and rescue Anakin and Obi-Wan. Then they go and they start attacking the Republic forces, and you see these like round battleships just taking off, and the Republic cannons are shooting them out of there. What those actually are is the core section of these battleships, which are actually able to disengage from the outside ring and drop into the atmosphere and land to provide a early base of operations for an invasion force. I said, what did you use for reference materials? He said, mainly pictures from the Phantom Menace. Sometimes I will look at other models out there to get a feel for what worked well and what to avoid, but in this instance, the only other truly magnificent LUCREHULK out there is the 30,000 part behemoth, which I did say earlier in this video. There is another design out there, and it's just a massive, beautiful piece, but it's too big for me. What designers do you look up personally? He said Eric Varzeghi. Sorry if I don't pronounce that right. It was actually his massive Venator model that inspired me to design my smaller version of the Venator, which was my very first quality mock. And if you go to this designer's webpage, I'll post his link in the description. He does have a Venator. I believe he has an interdictor class Star Destroyer. He has the LUCREHULK, and I believe he has a couple other designs that he's done. So he does have some good ones on his page if you guys would like to check those out. I said, what is your favorite LEGO theme? And he said, without a doubt, Star Wars. Same with me. I'm basically a Star Wars collector. What design has had the best reception? And surprisingly, he said the Venator. And if I had to take a guess, it would be the LUCREHULK, but I have a feeling it's because the LUCREHULK is such a brand new design. It really didn't get much reception until me and my friends started posting pictures of it on the LEGO Star Wars Facebook groups. So what are your future design plans? He said, I'm currently working on a scale recreation of the Eclipse from the old canon Star Wars. This will be the first ship I've designed with a fully minifig scale playable interior and will even be larger than the LEGO Imperial Star Destroyer or UCS set. I'm very excited about it, and the first model is on track to be completed in roughly 1.5 months. So since it took him only 3 days to design this thing, and it's taken him a couple months to design the Eclipse, I have a feeling that's going to be another doozy from this designer. So please visit his page. He's a very good LEGO designer. He's also a great guy. I've had the opportunity to communicate with him one-on-one on Facebook, and I plan on buying more of his designs here in the future for this series. But for right now, I have a couple other designs that I've already built, so I'm not going to be able to take you guys through the actual build process unless I actually get the motivation to tear them apart and rebuild them again and do like a stream. But along with the LUCREHULK, I also have about the same size. I have a Providence class Star Destroyer, which is the Invisible Hand, General Grievous's second flagship. I also have a Rikusen class Light Destroyer that I'm going to be reviewing, and then I also have a Munificent class Star Frigate that I'm going to be reviewing. And then at the very end of those videos, I'm going to combine them all together, and I'm going to do a Separatist Fleet video where I'm going to show off all my custom, basically medium-sized models of my custom Separatist ships. So hopefully, you guys like this video, subscribe, and come back for the next one, which will be the Providence class destroyer.